And while we do so, Per will introduce our next speaker, which is, hey, it's me.
Okay, Linus, this fantastic guy. He's a life science engineer, which I think is one of the coolest jobs you can have, or titles you can have. Linus was the first one to introduce me to thinking about, really, really big, long lives. When I talked about 10 years extra here, that's nothing compared to what you're going to talk about. And so we need to open our minds if that's going to happen. Linus has invited so many scientists that are part of our cluster, which is, I think, reason why you're here, so that we can share the knowledge that is out there. And the more I work with Linus, the more I'm convinced that longevity is really, really big. It feels stupid to say it, but it's going to affect all parts of society, starting with ourselves. Okay, Linus, please.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Per. All right, 20 minutes, then we'll have a longer break and you can continue to mingle and network a bit. All right, we will now shift from the basic science more to the industry part. So what I'll do right now is I'll give you sort of an overview of the longevity industry, and then I'll try to sort of synthesize what I think AI could mean for the longevity industry. How can we speed things up, basically? But first, sorry for you guys, some of you, I know you've heard this before, but we'll get to the good stuff. But first, who am I and what are my qualifications for talking about aging? So this all began for me as an existential crisis as a teenager, when I started asking myself the fundamental existential questions, like what's the meaning of life? What are we doing here? And how does the universe work? So I started reading. I read I don't know how many hundreds of books. First on philosophy, but eventually I found science and the scientific method, and I was hooked. I thought wow, this is great stuff. I read a lot of physics, a lot of chemistry, and I thought it was just wonderful. And then one day when I was reading, I came across this mind-blowing fact, and that is we don't know any laws of nature, any laws of physics or chemistry that makes it impossible to extend human life indefinitely. Okay, this was, wow, I was completely mind-blown. Then I started reading seriously about biology, and I realized this is a super complex phenomena. We will never do this in my lifetime. And I was like, I was quite depressed, to be honest. But I thought, no, this is too important. I have to dedicate my life to working on this, to working on the problem of aging. So, said and done, I studied civil engineering, technical biology in Linköping University, did some work on stem cells at Karolinska, and for the past 7 years, I've been working as a consultant within the pharmaceutical industry. Last year, we started the Swedish Longevity Cluster, and for the past 4 years, I've also written a book called Läkemedel mot Åldrande, which is over there if you're interested. I have a bunch of copies. So, this book, what is this? The goal of this book is to give a popular science description that anyone can read and sort of get a basic understanding of what aging is at the cellular level, right? So it's popular science, and that's one part. The other part is a philosophical and ethical argument, and I argue in this book that the goal of our movement, the longevity movement, if you will, is to extend a healthy lifespan indefinitely. Now, again, this is super hard. I think it's probably harder than landing on the moon, but it is possible. Now, it might take 100 years, but it is possible, all right? So if you think it's interesting to think about life extension and the ethics, and will there be overpopulation? No. I have a sort of a quite long part in this book where I discuss this problem. All right. So that about the book. Some of the slides I'm going to show, I'm going to give credit to a guy called Nathan Chen, who is awesome, who's the co-founder of the Longevity Biotech Fellowship. So I just want to give some credit to him. And I also want to advertise about something called Vitalist Bay. If you want to build something, if you want to start a company, do something within the space of longevity, this is the place to be. Brian Johnson and all the sort of influencers will be here, but also the serious scientists from the Buck Institute. So this will be in April and May of next year at Berkeley campus. And, anyone can join. So if you're interested, please check it out. All right. Now, a question. Who here would like to die against their own will? No takers. Okay, good. That's the right answer, what I was hoping for. Okay, what is then killing us? Well, these are the top sort of 10 causes of death, and they are basically, so we have heart disease, we have stroke, diabetes, different forms of dementia and so forth. These are all age-related diseases. And in the developed part of the world, these represent somewhere of like 90+% of all causes of death. In other parts of the world, it's lower, but it's the largest problem, right? Okay. Also, for all our major diseases here in Sweden, folksjukdomar, aging is the root cause. So if you sort of dislike disease, if you like being healthy, you should very much dislike aging. Okay, so can we do something about aging? Yes, we can. And here I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say what I think is the ultimate goal of our movement. And it's this. It's to extend lifespan indefinitely. Now, I'm very well aware that this is not the mainstream sort of position, and this has been considered historically naive for good reasons. We didn't have any sort of molecular understanding of what aging was. I think it's like 2013 is really the inflection point where this sort of went from being, theoretically possible to we're starting to see that it will happen, but it might take a long time. And now to sort of I need to point out here that this does not mean that it's easy or will happen like soon. But to reiterate, we know that it's possible. Okay, how can I say this? What's the arguments here? First of all, I already told you, we're not breaking physics here. Okay, that's the starting point. You should always check that box. The second one is that there are many species in nature that do not age. Well, in other words, the risk of dying does not increase with chronological age, right? We have the Greenland shark, we have the stonefish family. The lifespan varies from, I think it's from 8 to 200 years, which is quite amazing. And all life on Earth is related. We have the same common ancestor as these non-aging species. So, in a sense, we have proof of concept. And thirdly, of course, we have the hallmarks of aging. We have characterized what aging is. To say a few words, just to reiterate, if I can go back here. Yeah, this, I'm not saying that this is easy or that we will do this in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. It might take, I don't want to promise anything here. We don't know. It could take 100 years if it's if it's harder than we think. But it is possible, and I think we need to sort of really, this is a crucial fact, and we should really get this across. All right. As we heard previous speakers before me mention, these are the so-called hallmarks of aging. They're not an explanation. They're more of a categories of damage system. So a lot of damage accumulates when we age. And this is a classification system. Yeah, we have like mitochondria, we have misfolded proteins and so forth. But the hallmarks of aging, this paper is really significant because it sort of turbocharged the industry. The longevity industry basically didn't exist pre-2013. Now we have, I'll tell you, we have a lot. So if you just look at this timeline, longevity biotech is defined as the companies that are developing drugs targeting aging and also diagnostics, as we heard Sarah speak about just now. So the empirical evidence really started in the late 20s, in the early 90s, where we had the discovery of many age-related genes and intracellular pathways. And this laid the foundation for drug development. And then we have a few companies in the beginning of the 2000s. They generally didn't succeed. They all failed. And then we had 2013 with the growing, the field really took off, basically. And we had the founding of Calico by Google, and also Craig Venter, who helped to sequence the human genome, created a company called Human Longevity Incorporated. In 2016, we had a lot of more and interesting things coming online. For example, partial reprogramming, which is really hot right now. And in 2024 and like the present time, we have a lot of cool influencers, and we have a lot of funding flowing to this space. All right, so then you might think, oh, okay, we're sort of well on our way to solving this problem. I'm sorry to say we are not. We have 0 interventions today. We have 0 drugs that you can take that we know for sure will extend your healthy lifespan. Okay, this is not good. We need to change this. So the current state of the industry is, yeah, we have this explosion of interest, but the industry is still tiny compared to what we would need if we were going to solve aging in our lifetime. So we need massively more resources. Okay. We have these big headlines, Altos Labs, funded by Jeff Bezos. They have now $3.5 billion, and some great scientists, Steve Horvath, among others. Sam Altman, of course, invested $180 million in Retro Biosciences, and we had some scientists from that company joining us here in January at our conference, which was super fun. And we have a lot of other stuff going on as well. Saudi Arabia is worth mentioning. They created a fund called Hevolution, and they are committed to spending $1 billion on basic aging research and investment in longevity biotech industry. For reference, this is about like 3 times the amount that the Americans are spending via the National Institutes of Aging. All right, so this is great. And I also need to mention, on our conference in January, we had Daniel Ives, who is this guy here, and he held a great workshop, and we had a nice group photo, and he just took in some money. So this is a great sort of example that, yeah, the industry is growing, and we are getting some investment. So this is fun. All right. Now, I think this is quite important. If you want to develop drugs to target aging, how do you prove that they work? This is a fundamental question. Now, I'm going to show you a figure soon. Actually, I'm going to show you right now. There are 220 longevity biotech companies right now. Okay, that's a lot of companies. Okay, so what are they doing? Almost all of them are doing number 1 here. So single indication, like a specific disease, heart disease, for example, and then label expansion. So you develop your drug for a specific indication, like a specific disease, and when you're successful, you do additional studies proving that this medication works for more and more stuff, basically. Now, this is not the easiest and best way to do this. I mean, there might be a medication that has sort of general rejuvenation properties, but does not ameliorate symptoms from a specific age-related disease. And with this paradigm, you won't be able to approve that drug. So another way to do this, number 2, is biomarkers of aging, and this is, of course, where Sarah is an expert. So I think this is completely crucial, and we need to validate and measure aging correctly at the cellular level. We need to be really, really good at this, and this is why the Biomarkers of Aging Consortium is super important. And I wish Godspeed to these people. Whatever you do it faster. All right, and there are some other ways to do this as well. That I'm not going to mention right now. But these figures are, they're quite huge. We have an industry now. We have about 40 clinical trials. So this is good. This is not, this industry exists. That's awesome. But it's still a tiny field, okay? We're not nearly as big as we need to be to solve this problem in our lifetimes, okay? If you just look at startup funding, longevity biotech is like 3% of all biotech funding. Okay, this should be like, 50% or something, a lot more at least. If you look at research, the story is basically the same. So in the US, the National Institutes of Health, they allocate about 0.5% of their research budget to fundamental aging biology research. We need to increase this now. This is super important. I'm trying to do and this is the US figure, but it's basically the same in Europe and in Asia as well. I've been trying to look at these figures. It's kind of hard to determine what's aging science and what's not, but this is sort of the general level where we are. I'm trying to do my part. I just went to the parliament last week to meet with some parliamentarians, and we're going to do a session on this. So if you have any politicians, if you know anyone, please have them contact me. We will want to do like a over like not a specific party, but like basically all the parties in the parliament to sort of join us and tell them, yeah, this is important. Please give us more money, basically. All right. But the good news is this. Today, we actually have a global longevity community. And this was not the case 20 years ago when I started as a teenager, like reading about this and try to like read papers and contact scientists. There was like nothing. It was like Aubrey de Grey with a beard who sort of looked crazy, and I'm like, okay, is this pseudoscience? What is this? But today we actually have a global longevity community, and this is great. I think this is the great hope here. So who are these people? Well, we have the scientists, like the traditional super great scientists at universities across the world. We already heard mentioning of this conference, ARDD in Copenhagen, which to my knowledge is the largest one. And this is great, and aging research is sort of gaining credibility, because this has been historically not a very cool field to work on, so we didn't have a lot of resources. But this is slowly but surely increasing, so this is great. Another new phenomenon, like the last decade maybe, is that we have all these longevity influencers. You might have heard of Brian Johnson. He's on TV or on social media. He's everywhere. And we also have David Sinclair and De Grey, of course. And I think this is awesome. A lot of people that would otherwise not know about longevity are being introduced to this topic. Now, I have a lot of critiques of what some of these people are doing, but nobody's perfect, you know. And thirdly, in the top corner here, there is sort of an underground, hardcore life extension movement. Now, people have been interested in sort of life extension for a long time, but it has mainly been sort of discussion clubs, like reading science fiction and stuff like that, and not really serious. But for the past, I don't know, 5 years or so, this is a new group of people that have entered this area. These are like entrepreneurs with proven track records. They have created companies and they've sold them, and they have a great capacity. We have investors, we have sort of thought leaders, and a lot of people who are like competent people who can actually get stuff done. And I think this is truly awesome. And my dear friends Mark Hammerlein and Nathan Shen are the co-founders of Longevity Biotech Fellowship. All right, wonderful. We also have a lot of longevity organizations today that most of them did not exist 20 years ago. The Buck Institute, of course, the largest research institute on aging research in the world, in the Bay Area. Vitalism, the Alliance for Longevity Initiatives. So it's basically one guy called Dylan who's lobbying the US Congress. And I love Dylan, he's awesome, but it's one guy, okay? And he's trying to do what I do here, like increase the research funding for basic research. Okay, we need more people doing this. Okay, cool. Now, what about AI? Let's see, what's the time? All right. How will AI affect longevity biotech? Right now, today, it's already happening. So one way you could do it, you could do drug discovery from large data sets. So BioAge and Yera are two great companies that are doing this right now. BioAge recently did a large IPO, so they took in, I don't know, 160 million, something like that, a large amount of money. That's awesome. We also have chemistry, which we will hear Aisha speak about very soon. Yeah, you're here somewhere. So In Silico Medicine is, I'd say, like one of the leading companies in the intersection of longevity and artificial intelligence. And we also have computer vision. We heard a bit about this before, and I just want to highlight one company here, Aura Biomedical. Now, they are really cool. They're building something called the WormBot. And what is the WormBot? Well, C. elegans is a model organism. It's a little small worm, translucent, about that big. So what they're trying to do is they try to do high-throughput drug screening. So they're going to test like hundreds of thousands of different molecules and see, can we extend the life in these worms? So they have like a big robot, and they have like dishes where the worms are sort of living, and then they have a picture. So it takes a lot of pictures on the worms, and you can identify worm A, B, and C, and so forth. And you can identify, yeah, when we gave this drug, the worms are sort of like living longer, right? Okay. So it's really cool, and I like that company. All right. Taking a step back, ways that AI can affect longevity biotech. Yes, accelerating drug discovery, that's great. That's sort of here and now. It's already happening. Another thing that is not really mentioned, but which I've talked to a lot of people about, is simulation of biology, like taking that to the next level. So I did some work on systems biology, where you try to sort of understand how specific cellular system works. But you can imagine using these large language models and model aging much more comprehensively than we do today. You know, starting from the cell and moving up from tissue to organ to eventually the whole human body. Now, this is super hard, but I think it's if we leverage these new AI systems, we could definitely do this. And we might be able to include it in the FDA approval process. So the Food and Drug Administration in the US approves new medicines. And if we can show, yeah, okay, we did the traditional phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 studies, but we also did like 1 million simulation on this, basically like a digital twin. I think that could be a real piece of evidence that could potentially speed up drug discovery and drug development. That's awesome. Okay, now I'm going to do a little I'm going to end on a more sci-fi note here. I'm going to basically repeat what you said, Peter. So so I've been reading about AI for 15 years, and I have like half of my bookshelf is filled with like books on AI, and I've been following Nick Bostrom and Max Tegmark and all these people, and I'm trying to read these technical papers. But I always feel like, it's really hard to bracket the uncertainty here. I mean, is this stuff really going to happen? This, artificial general intelligence, I think it's really hard to know, But maybe we can do this. And if we can do this, if we can get some form of AGI, we can do a near-autonomous AI scientists, and we can couple this with automated robotics lab. And you can do a super fast iteration cycle, where you can have the AI scientists independently form a hypothesis and then test it super fast. And this can go on we're only limited by basically the laws of physics and time of the experiment. So this could potentially be very, very fast. So I'm hopeful this will happen. And I also need to mention this essay that Petra has already mentioned, Machines of Loving Grace by Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic. And this is the quote from this essay. If you haven't read this, I highly recommend you do this. I think it's a great essay. And yeah, I always think this is... I've been reading the science fiction literature and sort of the speculations about this for a long time. And I really... could you please provide me with a concrete, empirical reason why this would happen? Because anybody could say a number, but what actual reason do you have for claiming this? And I think that we actually have a good reason for believing this time. And I should also say that Dario, he correctly predicted the current increase in the capacity of large language models back in 2012. And he said, yeah, this is going to happen exactly at this rate. So what is happening here is something called scaling laws. So what is a scaling law? It's very simplified. It's how fast the performance of these large language models are increasing. And this is a very smooth curve. I didn't quite believe it when I read the papers first. You rarely see this outside of physics. The increase in these models, the capacity in these models, it's just super smooth. It's exponential, and it's really analogous to Moore's law that we've seen previously. Moore's law, you're probably familiar with. It's how many transistors can you fit in a given space? It doubles every 18 months. Well, these scaling laws, they double every 6 months. So it's really, really fast. Now, to be clear, this is not a law of nature. I mean, something might happen tomorrow and this will sort of stop. Who knows? But I mean, Moore's law has been true since the 1950s, and these so-called scaling laws has been true since around 2010. And if this continues, I think there's a high probability that what Dario said will actually happen. And I think this is the reason why I'm taking this seriously now and why I did not take it seriously maybe 5 years ago. All right, and the CEO of Microsoft says basically what I'm saying. So this is a 40-second clip where he explains where scaling laws, what it is.
the scaling laws as people describe them in AI. It's an empirical law, right? Like Moore's law was also not a physical law, it was just an empirical observation that we talked about it as if it was a law. But it held true. And similarly, the scaling laws basically are showing that every 6 months or so, we now have doubling of capacity. In fact, one of the things that I think a lot about is performance. You can even say tokens per dollar per watt. That's the new sort of currency. And you measure it by that. Every 6 months we have doubling. And some of it comes because of compute power. A lot of it actually comes from just better techniques around how to use data and algorithms. And so this is something that's inflected, right? You could say this began at the beginning of the DNN era in the early 2010s, but 2018, 2019, with the LLMs and the transformers, they inflected, and it sort of continues.
All right, very good. Now, I want to end on a word of caution here, and it's this. Look, I want us to embrace AI. We should use these tools to the fullest extent, but we should not abdicate our responsibility. For whatever reason, AI may not turn out to be super powerful and help us. So we need to solve aging ourselves, hope for the best, plan for the worst. So yeah, we need to do the hard work and sort of proceed under the assumption that we have to do this ourselves. I do believe this is possible. We will solve aging. It's a matter of time. If we do it in 20 years or in 100 years, it's simply a matter of how much resources we dedicate to this problem. So let's do it. We need a lot more resources to stop aging. All right, my last slide. If you find this interesting, please join us in the Swedish Longevity Cluster. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.